Welcome back to the Gentleman's Guide. Today, we're going to be discussing something that I know guys struggle with everywhere, and that is how to talk to a girl. Specifically in a way where the conversation feels natural and unforced, causing her feelings of attraction for you to grow. You see, time and time again, I see guys frustrated with their dating lives because of their inability to effectively communicate with women. I notice a lot of above average to even good looking guys having no problem at all getting matches on Tinder or getting lots of initial interests at parties or clubs, but things start to go south the moment they have to open their mouths. We're going to discuss why this happens, and I'm going to give you guys some tips and tricks so that the next time you're talking to a girl you're interested in, you don't freeze up with nervousness all of a sudden, and can actually hold a conversation that leads to potential romantic or sexual interest. But first, let's discuss what this video is about and what it's not about. This video is not going to teach you how to mindlessly babble. Although awkward silences are a real thing that can and should be prevented, I do not believe that silence in itself is necessarily a bad thing. In fact, based on my experiences, as well as the experiences of those I've discussed this with, silence can actually be an extremely powerful tool for building sexual tension. What this video is going to cover are some mindsets and tools you can use to minimize any feeling of discomfort during the interaction, and to maximize the chances that attraction will naturally build throughout this conversation. Because the truth is, anyone can keep a conversation going by simply asking boring questions in an interview mode. It's a lot harder, on the other hand, to keep a conversation going in a dynamic way while eliciting attraction. The key concept to understand throughout this video is that even though men and women both use words to communicate, they use them in very different ways. For example, studies have shown that women primarily connect with others through conversation, while guys tend to connect with each other through action. Furthermore, it's been suggested that women communicate through sharing their feelings and emotions, while men communicate through sharing their ideas and suggestions. Women primarily communicate to bond or feel closeness with someone, whereas men communicate to spread or gather information. Before we move into some of the more technical conversational tips, I first want to discuss two mindsets that you should be having throughout the interaction. The reason this is so important is simply because what you say isn't as important as how you say it. I could give you every single clever line in the book to help you flirt, but if you deliver them in a way that screams to her that you're not actually that confident, she's going to see right through the inconsistencies between your words and your body language. In order for your energy to be congruent with what you say, you need to be in the right mindset of how to approach an interaction with an attractive girl, because the right frame of mind will help you with both what to say as well as how to say it. And so the first mindset to discuss is assuming that the interaction will go well. I remember one day when I was a kid watching Animal Planet on TV, the narrator started commenting about some of the psychological long-term effects of neglect and abuse on dogs. He explained that when some dogs are rescued from abusive circumstances and taken into care homes before being put up for adoption, the dogs can sometimes have a tough time socializing with other humans due to bad prior experiences with humans in the past. It was as if based on its conditioning, it had learned to associate humans with pain and danger, and thus assumed that all interactions with humans would be similarly painful. Years later, as I matured, I learned to realize that humans are not too different from dogs in this way. I've known some guys throughout the years that, due to bad experiences with women in the past, learned to associate pain with interacting with girls in general. After years of being friend-zoned or frustrated in some other way, they learned to simply assume that the interaction would go poorly and that the girl wouldn't like them, essentially projecting future results based on past results. This bad attitude in regards to talking to girls tends to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Guys who assume that their interactions with women will be fun and exciting all the time, even though this is rarely the case, will outperform guys who assume the opposite by far. By assuming that you're going to have a smooth time flirting with that girl that you just met, you'll both increase the likelihood that you'll summon up the courage to go up and talk to her, as well as the likelihood that the interaction will actually go well, because your body language will tell her you're at ease, completely comfortable, and just having fun, which are all positive traits for her to be able to observe in you. So always assume that an interaction will go well. Sometimes a little irrational confidence goes a long way. The second mindset I want to instill into those watching is to always let her know that you're talking to her as a man to a woman, preferably as soon as possible. One of the biggest mistakes that I see guys consistently make is that they'll talk to girls in a friendly, platonic manner for an hour or more straight and then somehow expect the girl to like them. Remember, the intention is to elicit attraction, so the only way to do that is to be upfront about your intentions, although in a playful and fun way. The only time I would suggest speaking to a girl that you really like in a platonic friendly way is if you have extreme social anxiety or something, and find it hard to even hold a normal conversation for 5 minutes with a stranger without having a mild panic attack. In those extreme cases, it may be necessary to practice small talk and just being friendly with her before you can eventually learn to directly flirt with girls right from the get-go. But in general, if you're genuinely interested in a girl, you must be willing to let her know this soon, because the more time she spends with you as a friend, the more she will categorize you as nothing but a friend in her mind. I'm sure most of us have felt the pain of being stuck in the friend zone with someone you were interested in because of bad circumstances, and the inability to make her desire known. Having this man-to-woman vibe throughout your interaction will greatly increase the likelihood that she'll reciprocate anything romantic and will save you from the wasted time and frustration of the friend zone. If you choose to make the vibe of the interaction flirty, there's little that she can do about it. You can turn any conversational subject into having a flirtatious undertone with virtually any statement if you choose to. This also helps with holding conversations longer, because if you start running out of things to say, you can always just default back into having a man-to-woman vibe, and any silences won't matter. Next, we're going to take a look at some specific tactics you can keep up your sleeve during a conversation with a girl. In my previous video on building rapport, I briefly mentioned the importance of listening, and to ask meaningful questions as opposed to asking random questions in an interview mode fashion. Let me flesh that idea out a little bit more here. Listening to her speak is one thing, but you can more effectively listen and ask questions by using a technique called conversational threading. This is essentially the ability to make a free-flowing conversation. As she's listening, listen for keywords and phrases that you can easily thread into the conversation. For example, if she says, "I went to Argentina last summer to study at a local university," you can have many directions where you could thread the conversation. You could respond with, "Really? I'm planning on going to Argentina next year," or "I like to travel as well," which is a good way to build rapport through shared experiences. The beauty of conversational threading is that there is no wrong response. You can essentially work with whatever response she gives you. Everything she says is something that you could thread with. I suggest threading conversations in both a logical and emotional way. This means that you can go from more formal conversation, i.e. logical facts, to a more personal, warmer conversation, i.e. feelings and emotions. So if she tells you she's a teacher, you can either continue logically probing about it, or you could discuss her emotions that must be involved with being a teacher. For example, you must feel amazing knowing that what you're doing is helping little kids. Here's some advice. Talk about a wide range of topics. It's always better to talk about a wide range of topics and actually develop a wide rapport rather than talking about just one subject and be in total agreement. Thread into multiple directions, talk about multiple topics, and you will both feel like you've connected on multiple levels. Here's an easy exercise as a way to practice conversational threading. It involves making what I like to call mental maps. Here's how it works. Pick something girls say that you hear often. So if you meet a lot of girls that are nurses, write nurse in the center of the paper and circle it. Then branch it out. Draw a line to a smaller circle, label it emotions. What emotions do nurses have in their work? What emotional qualities must a nurse have? These are all potential conversational topics. For example, isn't it amazing how sometimes you feel such an amazing connection with your patients? From the center circle labeled nurse, branch out into other directions. Make a bubble that says values, another that says job description, etc. How do these things relate to being a nurse? They are all potentially great conversational threads that you can branch out into and will make conversations more natural and interesting. Another tip I suggest to use during a conversation is to use cold reading. Cold reading is essentially making an observation about a girl based on certain traits she possesses, such as the way she's dressed, the way she's carrying herself, and even certain eye movements and body gestures. The reason this is so effective is that, in general, you give much more value in an interaction when you make statements rather than ask random questions, which is not the same as meaningful questions, and like we all know, women are attracted to men of value. Here's what an example of what a cold read might look like. Imagine you meet a girl and notice she has a tattoo of a small dog on her upper back. Now normally, you might ask something like, "Hey, why'd you get that tattoo of that dog?" But applying the cold read, you might instead say, "Wow, a dog tattoo. You're definitely the hippie animal-loving type of girl, aren't you?" Don't be afraid to exaggerate the cold read if you feel that she's being especially receptive towards you, as this is a form of playful flirting, which helps make your intentions more known. An example of this would be something like, "Wow, a dog tattoo. You're definitely some sort of vegetarian PETA agent, aren't you? I bet you're gonna come to my house right now and see if my pets are properly fed." Obviously, exaggerating cold reads in this way should be done with a playful, flirtatious demeanor. The beauty of a cold read is that it can always lead to multiple topics that you can potentially branch off into. If you give her a cold read and you're wrong, you'll probably either be corrected or asked why you thought that way, which adds more to the conversation. If you're spot on with your observations, then rapport will be built. Cold reading is something that you can combine with the conversational threading technique we discussed earlier to make a conversation with a girl more dynamic and interesting. Another thing to keep in mind when first talking to a girl you fancy is the speaking ratio of the conversation. Realize that when you first go up to talk to her, especially if you don't know her, you'll probably have to do about 90% of the talking, so be prepared to do this. A 90 to 10 ratio for the first few minutes is normal before she starts feeling comfortable enough to contribute more to the conversation. As you start to demonstrate to her that you can hold a conversation well and aren't creepy or weird, eventually the ratio will dip to 80-20, then 70-30, all the way to eventually around 50-50, when you can start getting her equally engaged in the conversation. A good technique to get through the first few potentially awkward minutes of you doing most of the talking and her just observing you is to just lower the bar of what you have to say in order to take away pressure from yourself. When you're in the initial 90-10 ratio stage of the interaction, her requirements of what she needs to see from you before investing more into this conversation with a stranger is not as high as you think. All she needs to see is that you're a normal enough person with no bad intentions. I see many guys who put so much pressure on themselves to say the perfect witty line that they end up frozen, unable to say anything. So long as you maintain a flirtatious frame, you can talk about pretty much anything at the beginning of the conversation, before the speaking ratio starts to balance out more. If you say something silly, comment on it and laugh. Having a lighthearted attitude during this beginning phase will let her know that you don't take yourself too seriously. Again, women communicate with feelings over logic, so she's not logically grading your words from a scale of 1 to 10 on how witty you are. In fact, she probably doesn't care too much about what you're saying, more so about you saying it in a way that makes her feel that you're grounded enough in your confidence and genuinely care about her. So to summarize, today we discussed some tips on how to talk to girls in a way that feels natural and elicits attraction. 2 mindsets to enter the interaction with that we went over was always assuming that the interaction will go well and to establish a man-to-woman vibe. Some tips and tricks during a conversation with a girl that we went over are conversational threading, cold reading, and lowering the bar of what you say in the initial phase of the conversation while you carry most of the talking. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you took something away from watching this that you can start applying immediately. If you enjoyed this video, click here to subscribe for more content that I'll be uploading each week. Until then, see you later.